Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Chatham Select Board meeting of January 3rd, 2023. Happy New Year, everybody. Pursuant to Governor Baker's July 16th, 2022 signing of an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, including the extension of his March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, until March 31st, 2023, this meeting of the Chatham Select Board is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 1-508-945-4410, conference ID 203-386-491#, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on Channel 18, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Our first item of business is to call the roll. Mr. Nicastro?
Present.
Ms. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Shell?
Present.
Mr. Metters?
Present.
And Mr. Dykens is present as well. Next item of business are the minutes of December 27th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to
Motion to
the minutes.
approve?
Thank you, Mr. Metters.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Edits, comments, suggestions, no hands are raised. We're all set, good to go. Okay, Mr. Metters, what say you?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Nicastro?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda this evening are public announcements and agenda item requests. We have announcements from the board. Mr. Metters?
Sure. First of all, Happy New Year, everyone. January, first meeting of the year. Perfect opportunity to remind people of all the vacancies on our various boards, committees, and commissions. So if anyone has any New Year's resolutions and they want to serve a little bit of time with the town, here is your opportunity. So here's a list of the current openings on our committees. Aunt Lydia's Cove Committee, 1. Cable Advisory Committee, 1. Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Committee, 1. Committee for People with Disabilities, 2 associate. Conservation Commission, 3 associate. Cultural Council, 1. Economic Development Committee, 3. Energy and Climate Action Committee, 2. Historic Business District Commission, 1 alternate. Human Services Advisory Committee, 1. Independent State Parade Committee, 1. Local State Building Code Board of Appeals, 4. Open Space Committee, 1 alternate. Pleasant Bay Alliance Representative, 1. Public Ceremonies Committee, 3. Railroad Museum Group, 1. South Coastal Harbor Committee, 1. Traffic Safety Committee, 1 alternate. Wastewater Intermunicipal Agreement Advisory Board, 1. Zoning Board of Appeals, 1 associate. Members serve 3-year terms. Associates and alternates serve 1-year term. Non-resident taxpayers who are eligible serve on advisory committees, the Cultural Council, and the Council on Aging Board of Directors. Only those registered to vote in Chatham are eligible to serve on regulatory and statutory boards and commissions. All interested parties are encouraged to apply to the Office of Town Manager or by completing a talent form found on the town website at chatham-mass.gov/talent bank form. So if anyone has some spare time, please consider serving the town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Excellent job. Come one, come all. Volunteer for your town. Any other announcements from the board? Any announcements from the public? Any announcements online? Okay, I see none. Agenda item requests. Agenda item requests from the board. I do have one. And it is, at the risk of opening potential Pandora's box here, I'm going to stick my neck out and put the agenda item request of what are we going to do about the Commerce Park Lake? We have a lake in Commerce Park that is just gigantic. And it's a danger. It's a public health danger, I believe. And it's really something that we need to do what we can as a town to help figure out. So that's an agenda item from me. I was out there the other day, and it is just a disaster. So you can't use the road. You can't access the businesses. It's awful. So, and I know it's private property, but whatever we can do to help, I think we need to make it I need to make a formal agenda item request. Anything else from the board this evening? Anything else from the folks here and or online? Okay. So we'll go on to our next item. We have a public hearing this evening, which is a suggestion for parking restrictions at the cow yard. And I will invite, who am I inviting up here? Yes, sir.
Would you like to have the public hearing?
I would like to have that, and you know, I'm remiss, and I
That's
think we're...
okay. I love reading
I
these.
know you do. I know you look forward to this, Mr. Clerk, so please.
So bear with me here. The Chatham Select Board will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, January 3, 2023, at 5:30 PM in the large meeting room at the Town Office Annex, 261 George Ryder Road, to consider the placement of new traffic signs. First, no parking on the north side of Cow Yard and the first 25 feet north and south of Cow Yard. Second, limited parking June 1 to September 15, also on Cow Yard. Chatham residents, property owners, mooring permit holders, displaying proper stickers only. The signs are of standard size and style and recommended to the board by the Traffic Safety Committee. All interested parties are encouraged to participate. Sign the Select Board.
Thank you very much, Clerk Shell. Well done, well read. And welcome, officer. You're representing the cow yard here?
Yes,
presenting
I'm the Traffic
restrictions.
Safety
Okay.
Committee liaison for the Police Department.
Super.
And just to go over the recommendation, the Traffic Safety Committee met over multiple meetings with a variety of different residents that expressed their opinion on this. We also met with some of the heads of some of the other committees, as well as some of the department heads from the town to discuss the different options that have been proposed and discussed. What we present here is what really kind of boiled down to what everybody agreed upon, which was the three recommendations. The first is the restriction of parking on the north side of Cow Yard for the entire length. The general gist behind that was to maintain an emergency access to the landing, specifically for larger vehicles such as fire trucks, ambulances, or the fire department when they're trying to launch their Zodiac. During the past couple of summers, I've made observations, the members of the committee have made observations where when vehicles are parked on both sides, it's very narrow to try and get down through there, and it would be almost impossible to get a larger vehicle down through there. So that's the origin of that request for the north side restriction. The first 25 feet on Cow Yard on the south side is simply to maintain access in and out so that there's not vehicles parked right up to the edge of Old Harbor, creating a visual obstruction for vehicles trying to exit that parking area. And the third would be the restriction of parking on the south side. The limits imposed from June 1st to September 15th would be for the Chatham residents, property owners, mooring permit holders, et cetera, displaying the stickers. It's very similar to what we already have in place on Claflin Landing.
Okay, thank you. Reaction from the board, or comments from the board, and then we'll go to this as a public hearing, and please remind me if I'm remiss again, but Mr. Metters and then Mr. DeCastro.
Only question I have, and I know there's been several meetings on this discussion, and this is the concern I always have when we talk about making restrictions on certain areas. What is the effect of pushing that traffic elsewhere? What conversations was anything discussed on that topic, and any reaction and thoughts? Because the one thing we don't want to do is take the problem that exists here and then push it over here. So.
In previous discussions that we've had that have brought up the displacement issue, it's usually been related to something like the Fish Pier, where there's a specific destination and there's parking in that general area. My personal opinion in this particular case, the draw is the landing. A lot of people are using that sort of as a de facto public beach. So I don't know if there's going to be as much displacement of parking from the Cow Yard as there would be from someplace like Barcliff Avenue.
Maybe, maybe not. Okay, that's my only question. Thank you.
Mr. DeCastro, then Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Lieutenant. Good to see you. Just one question regarding the recommended restriction at the entrance on either side. Did the fire department express any position on that?
I spoke briefly with Chief Tavano regarding the north side restriction. I don't want to speak for him, but our discussion was that would most likely be something that they would support to maintain access down to that landing itself.
Right.
The specific thing that we discussed was...
There's the chief.
There he is. I won't speak for him.
Thank you. Can we hear from Chief
Sure.
Tavano? Thank you.
Hello, Chief Tavano. Why don't you comment, please?
Hi, good evening, everybody. The lieutenant articulated everything very well. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, we are in support of that recommendation. I can't cite specific examples in the past where we haven't been able to access the landing. However, as the lieutenant indicated, it is very tight as we do our pre-planning, especially in the summer months when we go down there and look at the landing, both from an access from an ambulance standpoint, but also as we trailer our Zodiac, if we needed to navigate that road to get the Zodiac to the water there, it would be nearly impossible. So the fire department is in support of this recommendation.
Chief, so your concerns extend as well to the first 25 feet, the recommendation being that there be no parking on either side because of the potential obstruction to visibility?
Visibility and also potentially swinging the larger apparatus out of there, making the turnout.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Ms. Davis?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. This is for Chief. When you said that you were, the access to the front of the landing there was to be able to put your Zodiac in there. Has there been any instance where you've used that Zodiac and launched it from there?
It's been quite a number of years since we've launched out of Calyard. We've mostly moved over to riders at this point for launching our boat on that side, just for ease of access. But it certainly would be advantageous for us to be able to add that to our planning to be able to access Calyard. It's kind of why we've gotten away from Calyard, is just the unreliability of access to it. And
so the fish pier is a more go-ready approach to getting access to the waterfront if you needed to get out on the water.
Over at Riders Cove.
Yeah, or Riders Cove. Okay. Let me just look at my notes for a second. So one of my questions was about pushing cars to another location. Where do you think folks are going to go if they're not going to park at the cow yard to go to the beach or go clamming or, access that waterfront area? There's still, people will be looking to park there. Where are they going to go?
They could go to the Scattery area, Kochpinicket. But I think the draw here is to be able to use that landing as a beach. So if they're going to get displaced, they would probably go to one of those two areas there.
All right. I'm going to save some of my comments to after the public hearing, after we hear from the public. Thank you.
Mr. Shell?
Yeah, I just have one question. There's a reference in the Waterways Advisory Committee report to a no parking. They recommend against a no parking turnaround area at the east end of the road. There's no reference to that in what is recommended here. Can you just sort of clarify exactly how that
Sure.
works? Thank you.
That was one of the options that were being discussed in the initial phases of this consideration and this request, was to actually restrict parking on the east end on both sides to provide a turnaround area. As the recommendation developed and motions were made, that was eliminated in favor of this current plan, to give as much parking as possible on that south side while maintaining the access lane to the landing itself. And eliminating more spots for a turnaround spot was determined that they didn't want to eliminate those spots. We wanted to keep it going as much as we could.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. Yeah, I'm just a comment, I'll open it up to the public. I'm sensitive to restricting access to our town landings. I'm very much be able to have our town landings accessible, but especially by our residents and our folks that shellfish and need access to the water. So I would like to hear from the public and as to why they believe these restrictions, should be in place. We have so few town landings, we really need to preserve access to them. Yes, and please come up to the mic and identify yourself. Down in back, you raised your hand, sir, I don't know you. Please. Up there, please, just identify yourself and where you live in Chatham and what your interest is.
Hi, Alan Willett. We live very close proximity to the cow yard on Embry Lane. walk to the cow yard quite often, shellfish, have a mooring there. Was there in and out during the height of the summer, during the parking issues on the cow yard landing itself. So one, I guess I have a question as to how this would be monitored and controlled. Two, I guess the displacement issue has been raised, and in my opinion, people were already parking on Old Harbor, creating a very tight situation to walk down to the cow yard itself. People were half parked on the road, on the sides of the road, and with people coming down the hill on Old Harbor, whatever, 35 plus miles an hour. I believe it can cause a kind of a dangerous situation, as I see when people drive into the cow yard, they can't park there anymore. Their first displacement option is going to be to park on Old Harbor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Other folks in the public, the woman behind Mr. Bystrom and then Mr. Bystrom. Sorry I don't know everybody's name.
Hi, Gloria Hicks, Meeting House Road. I was at the Waterways Advisory Committee when this was being discussed. And I think it's great that it become a Chatham resident only, because it's become a very, very popular free beach. And we have 2 free beaches that people don't have to pay for parking, tourists can go to. My only question is, by restricting it as much as you're suggesting, if you get 4 or 5 shellfish people there, all the parking's gone. I've been there many, many times to shellfish, and I've had to turn around and leave. So it just doesn't seem like enough parking for residents. 4 or 5 people shellfishing like myself, and the parking will be done. And it's going to force people to park on Old Harbor. So that's the only question that I had.
Yes, thank you, Gloria, and I agree that displacement will happen, especially in the height of the summer. Should we restrict? Probably going to happen anyway, but Mr. Bystrom.
Good evening. Bill Bystrom, 345 Old Comers Road, Chatham. I have a commercial shellfish license, so frequently I'm in that area on an intermittent basis, not all the time, but I'm there quite often. And I've noticed there's a lot of traffic down there. And I've also noticed that the town has taken steps to improve certain situations, I assume, for the abutters. I noticed there is one and only one driveway that enters onto the cow yard, and that now has signs posted on either side of it that says, "Do not block the driveway." Also, if you go down to the actual landing, on each side of the landing now is a sign that says, "Limit of town landing," that people are not allowed to go beyond that. So I think partly it could be an issue that some people are concerned that visitors or beachgoers may be going onto their property. However, I believe under Massachusetts law that if anyone is hunting or fishing, such as carrying a hand line, they can legally go on to any beach property in Massachusetts. I could be wrong on that. But it also only deals with the land between high water and low water is open to the public, so that if you go down there and you want to stroll along the beach, or if you want to take your dogs down there, or if you want to go shellfishing, you have access to different points along the harbor. And I think that's sort of an important issue. The access has been there since colonial times. It's called cow yard because there used to be a pasture down there a long time ago where the settlers would feed their cows. So that what we're doing now is we're talking about blocking up one of the few access roads to the harbor. And if you measure that, you can compare it to Claflin Landing. Claflin Landing definitely is tight. The roadway at Claflin measures 20 feet across. However, the roadway at Calyard measures approximately, it could be 6 inches off either way, about 30 feet at the beginning, up to a wide area of 40 feet. Now, assuming that SUVs and trucks, a lot of trucks are about 6 feet wide, and that's pretty wide, that still gives you a significant amount of space to go up and down that road. If you have one lane of vehicles parked on both sides. I mean, you still have about as much as you would have on Claflin Landing if there was no vehicles parked there. So I really think that, really, one thing we're talking about is access to the waterways for the town. And there's a lot of people that have moorings down there. They like to come down. They like to access their mooring. There are a lot of people, as she mentioned, and myself, that like to shellfish, and we go down there. I haven't seen a problem there. I've seen a problem more with people who live in the neighborhood being concerned that there are too many vehicles there. But if the town's already dealt with that issue, I really don't know what the issue is. So,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Byström. Mr. Nacastro. Yep.
All right. Just wanted to ask the question. The property that had the signs, the two signs that say "Don't block the driveway," are those town signs or did the property owner?
they
put-
appear to me to be town signs.
Okay.
Because they, as I go further down, all the way, if you go all the way to the landing, one on each side of the landing is posted. Maybe the police, is it town sign or, do you know?
I believe it's town sign.
Yeah.
Then they've been up a long time, because I've been on, I don't recall that ever coming before us in my almost 8 years on the board, so they've probably been there a while, that's all I'm getting at.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never noticed the limit of town landing sign there. It could have been
Okay.
there a long time.
Yeah.
And it's very possible I just never noticed.
Yeah, I don't know either.
And that's likelihood.
Thank you.
Mr. Shell.
Maybe I'm a little slow, but are you suggesting that maybe we shouldn't adopt a regulation that bars parking on one side of Cow Yard?
Yeah, I do not think that bodes well for the people that use the cow yard. And even if you talk about, okay, and the police and the fire and the traffic safety committee have a lot more knowledge about this than I do, but if you're going to reduce the parking along the street, do you really need to reduce it 25 feet in? I mean, it seems to me, even 10 feet in would give you good visibility coming along Old Harbor Road. That's just a thought.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Byström.
Thank you.
I see our moderator, Bill Litchfield, has his hand up.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of Bud and B.A. Flanagan, who were two of the 6 or 8 property owners who nearby owners who originally brought this matter to your attention. I wasn't going to speak because Lieutenant Goddard and Chief Tavano spoke about the public safety issue, which is really what's involved here, because we have a confluence of the popularity of what is, as Andy said, has become a de facto free beach and summer crowds. The problem is that creates an inability, or at least hampers the use of the town landing, as the chairman indicated, for its traditional purposes of access to the water. And because of the beach parking at what is not a beach, we have a problem. But a couple of factual things. First of all the town landings have limit of town landing signs. They've been up for 40 years. Secondly, from Old Harbor Road to almost to the end is about 155 feet long, which is room not for 4 cars, but for 8 or 10 cars if they park appropriately just on the south side. What is most important, though, and the town landing, by the way, was laid out in 1890, and it's only about 23 feet wide, not 40 feet. At the end, it flares out to 38 feet. but that's only at the very end. So there's really not sufficient room for parking on the north and the south, and to get a regular vehicle down there, let alone a fire truck. So I simply wanted to talk, or to urge you to go back to how Lieutenant Goddard and Chief Tavano began the discussion. It's a public safety issue. The parking limits the appropriate use of the town landing, unfortunately, the overburdened parking which is there now. But I think by eliminating parking on the north side, you're going to do a lot to serve the public safety interests that Lieutenant Goddard and his committee and Chief Tavano spoke of. And I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bill Litchfield. Okay, yes, ma'am, I'm sorry. Please come forward and identify yourself. Speak your piece.
My name is Suzanne Phillips, and I wrote up a few comments, so I'm just going to basically introduce myself and state my issue. I've been working for the town of Chatham as a part-time temp for the last 15 years. I've had more than one job, but for the entire 15 years, I've been a deputy shellfish constable and also the lead shorebird monitor for North Beach Island. I'm an Orleans resident, and I'm on the Shellfish Waterways Committee there. I've been on there since 2012, and I'm currently the vice chair. And we are dealing with exactly the same issues, and they've been brought to our committee for several years. What I want to speak to about this proposed regulation is the part that restricts the parking to Chatham residents, property owners, and mooring holders only. And I'd like to give a couple of examples of other people who might need to park there. Obviously, people know about the shellfish deputy constables and shellfishers, and I understand the Shellfish Advisory Committee from this town and the constable, Renee Gagney, have made comments, so I don't need to add anything. For the shorebird monitoring, as lead shorebird monitor, I also have some special assignments given to me by Ted Keon, our Director of Coastal Resources, and they usually relate to dredging. For example, Fish and Wildlife will require a monitor to be there during dredging, so I'm usually out at Hardings Beach when those happen, but also any place where there are dredge spoils deposited. One of those places is Linnell Lane. In the last 4 years, there have been plovers down there 3 times. Last year, in 2022, they hatched on July 4th weekend. 2 of them on the 4th and 2 on the 5th, and I had to go down there every day for several days in a row. And before the hatching happens, the monitor has to go regularly and check and see if they're making a nest, and then if there is a nest, you put up the symbolic fencing and signs and all that. All that stuff I lug down by hand from the cow yard, by the way, because there's no access nearby. So that's one example of somebody else who may not have the local sticker who might need to get there. Another example is this past weekend, I was on patrol there, and I pulled in to the cow yard, and there was 1 car. So, of course, I went down to the end to see if it was somebody shellfishing. No, it wasn't. It was somebody from IFAW, and they had a placard in their car saying, "Responder on duty." And when I looked down the beach, there were a couple of people attending to a seal or something. I'm just using that as an example that there could be other people affected. In Orleans, we've had the same thing. One of the other people has been our water quality monitors. And I know what we did in Orleans was the police department hired basically a parking officer for the summer. And I'm not real savvy with computers, but the person has a little app and can punch in the tickets and all this and that. But one thing we're able to do is give them license plate numbers of some other people that might be doing work for the town in some of these places. We're also experimenting at one of our landings where there were all same kind of user conflicts and people using a beach that didn't used to be a beach and like that, with the police department just setting a certain number of parking spots, and whoever takes them, and anybody over that gets ticketed or towed. So if you're the shellfisher and you get there early in the morning, great, and if you're not, tough luck. Anyway, I don't have any answers. Certainly Orleans doesn't have any answers, but I wanted to ask people to consider that there might be people other than residents.
Yeah,
I
I
know
think-
myself, years ago, I was almost ticketed when I was working at the Upweller because at the time, there was no parking for non-Chatham people at the Stage Harbor Landing there. Now we can park alongside the harbor master's office, and it's not a problem, but that's just an example. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. I think you raised some good points. I think maybe if we included town employees and any prescribed parking on the south side, it might work to the benefit of everybody. Mr. Nacastro?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just going to ask and thank you for your comments. If the exception that applies to Chatham residents and property owners and mooring owners were extended to include anyone on official town or other government business, whether that would satisfy the concerns that every example you gave was of someone that was working for a government entity, I think.
Well, IFAW is a nonprofit, but the Deputy Shellfish Constable and the Shorebird Monitor are town employees, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think the problem will be enforcement, because obviously the police are going to enforce whatever the rules are, but right now, the rules tend to say Chatham residents, property owners, and that's why I almost got ticketed at Stage Harbor a few years ago, because I was neither, even though I was a town employee and working at work at the time that my vehicle was parked there. So it's just something to think about. Sometimes there's ramifications we don't think about.
Well, they
Right
could be
off.
given a sticker to put in their car or placard or something like that.
They've given us a parking permit, and it isn't good enough. Don't ask me why, but
Okay.
that doesn't suffice. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Mr. Metters?
Well, wouldn't this become more of a policy question? Because the police department would be enforcing any type of rules that were put in place. And if we're going to have certain type of special vehicles that, philosophically, we're like, fine, they can use these landings, it should apply to really any area in town that we have these rules in place. So I guess the conversation would be like, would we want to have these as kind of excluded from the state? But I think the signage is in place for the everyday usage, fishermen, mooring holders and stuff, the main volume of people, and recognizing these, special vehicles and entities that, periodically come down. I think it's more of a policy question that we don't necessarily have to put another sign up for, but that's just kind of my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Metters. Other comments from the public for our public hearing? Folks online, I see Dr. Duncanson's hand is up. Dr. Duncanson?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to address the comment regarding staff of the town. In the past, what we've done for water quality monitors and others is we give them a placard that they can put on their dashboard, which indicates, who they are, what program they're working for. And that has worked very successfully in the past. We've used that for water quality monitors. We use that for Mass Audubon when their folks, or IFA when they're responding to town property, for things like that. So we've had I don't want to necessarily call it a policy, but we've had a mechanism in place for many years to address those kinds of issues for people that are on town business but maybe don't have access to town vehicles.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Any further comment from the select board? Ms. Davis?
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, excuse me. I have a tickle in my throat, and this isn't going to work. So this is something that I've brought up a couple of times when we've talked about the parking restrictions along the Fish Pier, Chatham Bars Avenue, and whatnot, is that we don't have a comprehensive plan. I mean, we did talk about, we have a parking committee now a working group working on parking, the parking issues in generic terms, but it's not inclusive to the landings. And having worked out of Stage Harbor for many, many years and seeing how popular the landing became, we started to have restrictions put on the landing. And then obviously people were pushing themselves to the road, and then the entire road has a sign on what you can or cannot do in the way of parking on Stage Harbor Road. You can park your vehicle here, or you can't park your vehicle here, but you can park your vehicle in your trailer here, and so on and so forth. And I understand that there is the safety side of this, but I need to hear more documentation about the safety issues that are going on at this particular landing and maybe at other landings, because I I think that what we're seeing is, you know, I don't think this is going to be the only one that's going to come before us as far as, you know, a butter's concerned with the town landing and how it's become more popular over the course of the years. One of the things that I did recognize in working down in Stage Harbor all those years was, you know, there's 10 weeks. There's 10 weeks of all over this town that everybody is, you know, finding issues with access and issues with parking and whatnot. And we don't just go ahead and say, well, we're going to restrict parking when we have too much parking or too many people around. So I'd really like to see a more comprehensive documentation of safety, what that safety issue is there, how many times there's been a problem accessing the area, and you know, and also you know, that we start looking at the landings in a way that we have, as I had brought up before, when we were talking about, and I think we're going to talk about the trap dock management stuff later on, is to be inclusive of landings having some sort of comprehensive plans and have some oversight and recommendations outside of just traffic safety, but out the bigger picture, because this is an economic engine for the town of Chatham. The blue economy is huge. And what kind of message are we sending to working waterfront and to visitors that want to enjoy our town? I've brought this up before. Watch Hill, Rhode Island, there is really no public access at all to the waterfront. I know the commercial fishermen have to rent space from a local yacht club to be able to access that. And I'd hate to see that start to happen here as our town you know, changes and priorities are different, why people live here. So I'm not gonna vote in favor of this, because I think we need a more comprehensive plan, and I need to hear more documentation of the safety issues.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. Any other comments? Mr. Nacastro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, I appreciate everything that Select Board Member Davis has just said about access to the waterfront and support for our visitors in our commercial industry. At the same time, and I also understand that the parking working group that the town manager appointed is largely focused on parking in the downtown area. And I agree that there should be some sort of a broader parking examination and plan. And I think I would favor the creation of a formal advisory committee to this board on parking, rather than just having a working group focusing on the downtown. But at the same time, I recognize that, you know, we reconstituted, or we repopulated, I guess is the better term, the Traffic Safety Committee a couple of years ago, after several years of absentia. And that committee has undertaken very diligently to evaluate every circumstance that has been brought before them. Last year, we had the issue with Barcliff Avenue, and a majority of the board voted to endorse the parking restriction there. And we did have the advantage of having a number of visuals, photographs that were presented by one of the property owners on that street. And that would be helpful, I think, to this discussion. But at the same time, I tend to come down on these issues on the side of public safety. And when the fire department and the police department say that we need to widen the access by restricting parking so we can get our vehicles down there, I think that's where I would fall. So if we were to have a vote tonight, I would vote in favor of the recommendations of the Traffic Safety Committee. I don't know if, I'm not sure I want to put a motion on the table, because I'm not sure the motion would carry, but it'd be interesting to hear what other members of the board have to say, if anything, and then maybe I might offer a motion. But maybe it's, rather than killing this recommendation tonight, if the Traffic Safety Committee has some visual examples, and I see the lieutenant nodding his head, maybe we could continue this hearing to a future date and get some additional information and make a decision at that time rather than voting this up or down tonight. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro. Mr. Metters had his hand up, and then Mr. Shell.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I do believe, the public safety element is important, which goes to my first question I asked tonight about displacing the traffic, because people are going to come to this area. They already, to some level, are parking on Old Harbor Road, and I think we are going to expand that parking on Old Harbor Road. And I think that in itself is going to become a public hazard. There's no mechanism in place to prevent that right now. So I actually don't mind continuing this public hearing. I really hate to vote this up or down tonight because I'm not sure where it would actually land, and give it some chance to kind of flush out some of these questions. So I'd be more in favor of continuing this public hearing and seeing if we can work some of these issues out to give it as fair a vote as possible. But this is the displacement of traffic is going to come up in every single conversation we have. And I just don't want to keep pushing problems somewhere else, because I remember growing up here, and when the Lighthouse parking lot was the best place to go to the beach, and then we restrictions on that, and then we started getting pushed into the Old Village, and then down Bridge Street, and you saw how that thing just kind of expanded over. I'm talking years ago, when I was younger. But no, I guess bottom line is for tonight, I'd like to continue this public hearing, work out some of these issues, and see where we go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Metters. Mr. Shell.
First, I want to endorse in their entirety the remarks that Shireen made. I think they have relevance, frankly, not only for this issue, but for some of the other things that we're going to be talking about down the road, including one, at least peripherally, tonight. We do have, and I think this is pretty much where you were coming from, Dean, we have a safety committee that has considered this issue, that has consulted with the safety agencies, the fire department, the police department. We've had a report that is comprehensive from the lieutenant. I am very reluctant to say that we're not unwilling to accept that because of a problem which we need to address, but which is a much larger problem, namely, where does the parking go if you restrict parking here? I suppose we could have had a major discussion about the parking that was taken away in front of the retail shops on Main Street in order to accommodate pickups. This can go on forever, in my view. If we voted tonight, I would vote in favor of it reluctantly. I don't have any objection to continuing the hearing, but I think, to be honest with you, that we will basically be running around the mulberry bush on the same issue, which is where do we put parking that is being displaced when every year we have more cars and more people.
Thank you, Mr. Shell. I'm passing around a visual that was given by Lieutenant Goddard. I'll weigh in here. I echo Shireen's sentiments as well. We've learned from Barcliff and elsewhere that we're squeezing a balloon here, and you squeeze it in the middle and both ends get larger. To limit parking here and access to the town landing, thereby we're creating problems elsewhere on all the access roads that feed into their Stage Harbor Road. So I'm not real excited about imposing these restrictions, and I would like to see more data on whether or not we have real issues in terms of access, and how many times we've had emergency vehicles that have gone down there and needed to access that. I am extremely sensitive to preserving access for our residents to town landings, extremely sensitive. Every square foot in this town is now more dear than it was yesterday. And that means property values, it means downtown, it means town landings. And our citizens have a right and a need to access the water in our town landings. And I believe strongly that we need to preserve as much access as we possibly can to town landings. So I would not vote in favor of this suggestion this evening. And so you kind of know where the votes are. Corey suggested a continuation of the hearing. We could do that. to see if we get any more data on whether or not there really have been calls for emergency vehicles going down there. Very sensitive to what Suzanne Phillips said this evening about access for either staff and/or other organizations and/or other folks that need to access that landing. It's right on the harbor. It's a very, very important and sensitive town landing. I'm also extremely sensitive to the lessons learned from Barcliff. We are now struggling to figure out what we do on Shore Road, on Chatham Bars Ave, and elsewhere because we've restricted parking on Barcliff. It's a major problem in this town. Again, every square inch, every square foot in this town is more dear than it was yesterday, including access to town landings. And I feel as though we need to preserve it. And that notwithstanding, I have an immense amount of respect for our Traffic Safety Committee, immense amount of respect. They've done yeoman's work, and they've come up with a cogent plan. It's just one that I'm probably not going to agree with. Yes, please.
Good evening.
Hi, Joni.
My name is Joan Craig. I'm the chair of the Traffic Safety Committee, and I want to thank you for your comments in the audience and your comments this evening also. A couple of things that I would like to bring up in. One is I do have a photo here that I can pass around in my phone from August of 2022, and it was at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You will see that there are spaces on both sides of this photo. However, for an emergency vehicle to get down this street would have been impossible. So for a moment, if I could just give this to you, I would appreciate that, and then I have a few other comments.
And then, Jody, I did just pass around photographs that would probably portray the same thing. I have a question for DPW, for Jill, and for others. Would it ever be possible to widen that area down there?
This
I mean,
was also a question that we had asked back over a year ago about having gone down there where I could park. It was very, very sandy, and wondered what would it be to pave the area where you could have, where you could have more safe parking and parking on the, what I call the right side heading to the water versus the left side. A couple of other issues that have been brought up to us over the past 2 years, because this started with us in the summer of '21, with a lot of delays because they also have to speak with Waterways, the Waterways Committee, and they couldn't always meet when the appropriate people wanted to meet. The individuals who have property on that road have apparently, through conservation, had to put a lot of financial finances into having shrubbery, et cetera, outside of their property and along the road. We had pictures, I don't know if they're there, but we do have pictures where that shrubbery that was a cost to the private owners has been ruined by people parking now on their property and ruining the shrubbery that is actually on town property, but that was at a cost to the private owners. It is a landing, first and foremost, and like everything in Chatham, somebody found that there is a small area that can be beach, and suddenly it is a beach. But first and foremost, it is a landing. And I think if we keep that in mind, there are individuals who are using that. I spoke to some of them when I spent over an hour down there 2 summers ago to talk about this. They did not live in the town. They heard about the landing. It was quiet for them. That's why they were there, sitting in their chairs. If that's not available to them, they're going to find another, as was stated by a previous speaker, free beach or beach with a permit throughout the town that are beautiful beaches, Jackknife being one. I have concerns with the issues that have been brought up by the private owners with regards to belligerent discussion from people using the beach. I'm not talking about walking on the beach, I'm talking about sitting there. And I think these are issues that are being brought up to us because it's suddenly a beach and not a landing. So I think these are some issues that you also have to consider when you go forward with your vote, whether it be tonight or at another time. Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you, Joan. You know, you do a wonderful job for traffic safety. Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Nacastro's comments?
Yeah, I just want to ask either, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ask either Joan or Lieutenant Goddard, if we were to continue the hearing, is there additional evidence, visuals, or whatever that you could present?
Yes.
Develop and present? Or
Yes,
I'm just
throughout
trying to get to the point of whether it makes any sense to continue the hearing and have a vote tonight.
Throughout this process, we've received a tremendous amount of information from the people that had filed these requests, including photographs, descriptions, and so forth. It would have been much too large to forward to you folks at that time. If you'd like, I can put together a package of that if you wanted to continue this so that you can view that information.
How long would that take?
I could have it ready for your next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
And thank you, Lieutenant, and thank you, Mr. Nacastro. Well, 1 second. I've got Stuart Smith's hand is up. Stuart, recognize you.
Hey, good evening. I just wanted to follow up with Shireen Davis's comments about Yard Landing and other places in towns. Everybody knows we're experiencing these parking problems throughout the community, especially at our town landings and public access points. The traffic rules and regulations, I don't believe, have been updated since the 1960s, and it may be a good opportunity to dust off that document and look at this holistically throughout the community, so we can maybe get ahead of the curve here and stop, addressing these issues one at a time. I think it might be a good time to update that document.
And you know what? I think that's excellent advice, and Shireen mentioned it, and instead of even continuing the hearing, perhaps we ought to have a formal effort to see what we're going to do with town landings. Because we have the same issues at every town landing, same issues. We're going to have a constant tension between public safety, access, vehicles getting to town landings versus the use of the town landings themselves and access by the public, be they residents of Chatham or not. So it's never going to end until we have a policy and a procedure that we can live with. Ms. Davis wants to speak.
I agree with you, Jeff, and this was my point as we've gone through this exercise a few times in the last couple of years, is that a comprehensive plan would be easier for us. We're piecemealing things, and it doesn't make any sense to me because it's, these one-offs, are here and there, and, it's not making sense to me to address it one by one. We wouldn't do this for wastewater. We wouldn't do this for any other. Traffic safety is part of it. There's other parts and pieces to this that need to be considered. And the holistic look, as Harbor Master had mentioned, is where I see we should be heading rather than making a decision on this.
And I totally agree with you, Ms. Davis. Mr. Bystrom wants to speak.
Thank you. Just for a point of clarification, the way I determined the width of the roadway was I went down yesterday, I took a tape measure, and I measured it. Now, whether or not it's supposed to be 23 or whatever, it is 30 feet across, and it goes to 40 feet across. When I went to Claflin Landing, it was like 19.8 across. So, again, we need to get all our ducks in a row. We need to get information. And I also have a great deal of respect for the Traffic Safety Commission and for the fire department. I understand that they're concerned only for the safety and the welfare of the people that are using the facilities in the town. And I agree with that. But the question that I think several people brought up is, how often has this occurred? I'd like to know, what was the history? How many times has, over the last 20 years, there's been an emergency that they had to go down and use that? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bystrom. Okay, anybody else here or online for the public hearing? Okay, I'll push it back to the board here. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, I'm perfectly satisfied with this outcome. One of the metrics that I think we have to look at, comprehensive policy or individual case, either way, is what, and I would like to have known here, we got an estimate, I think, of 8. What, if we put a restriction on parking for safety reasons or any other reasons, what is the number of cars that are displaced by that parking, that are displaced by that? As I said, I think Mr. Litchfield suggested it was 8 in this case, and that's a relevant consideration every time we look at something like this.
Mr. Nicastro and then Ms. Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm not prepared to bring down the hammer on this tonight. I mean, we've heard that the committee can come forward with some additional information. I think we ought to keep this open. The harbor master suggested, and I think it's a good suggestion, that the parking regulations, which I think go back to 1955, should be updated. But who's going to do that? Is this board going to do it? I don't think so. I think there should be a formal advisory committee created to look at parking, and they should take a look at those regulations and come forward. And that's not going to be a short-term process.
No.
So we could take the position that we're never going to look at any individual street recommendation until that's done. I'm not sure that's in the best interest of public safety. And there are a lot of countervailing considerations here, and it's up to us to make the ultimate decision. So I'm going to put a motion on the table that this hearing be continued for 1 month.
Second.
Okay. Comments on the motion and the second. Ms. Davis.
I'd rather that we forego the public hearing. I'm not sure what the process is, whether we have to take a vote or not, or just to suspend it, but not for the month, but suspend it until we have that advisory committee in place and we have a comprehensive parking plan. I don't want to make another decision. I'm going to say it'll be a no vote for me on everything until we get that comprehensive plan put together. I think it's important. Traffic safety is one piece of it, and I think that we need to be looking at everything. The idea that there was a belligerent exchange brought up and should be considered, or the traffic safety was brought up. That's not a traffic safety issue. That's an access issue. That's a conflict of use issue. Those are that's a whole different thing, and could be part of the motivation of restricting parking. And I'd like to see that we have something in place that people can go to and see that this is what we're doing and this is how it works, instead of the one-offs.
Yeah. Anybody else? Mr. Shell. So we have a motion to continue the hearing, and it's been seconded. And we'll take a vote. I'm of the philosophical bent with Shireen, but I am willing to continue the hearing, so I'll vote in favor of its continuance. Many good points have been made tonight, and I think we have many conflicting, conflicting desires here as we look at it, especially at our town landings. I think one of the longer-term things is also making sure we know what the limits of the town landings are or aren't. Could the cow yard be legally made wider? Could Riders Cove, could, a whole bunch of town landings that we have in town. So I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of understanding how we're going to manage our town landings, and they are critical to the quality of life in this town for our residents. So anyway, I'm going to vote for the continuance, and let's get some more data, let's see what kind of pictures we have, et cetera. But again, I am very sensitive to limiting access. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Mr. Nicastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
No.
Mr. Shell?
Yeah, forgive me, I want to
Please go ahead.
explain. Lieutenant Goddard, among others, has offered additional information, a packet that he represented was representative of a very comprehensive collection of evidence that they had, and I think we absolutely should keep this open and offer the committee an opportunity to put that in front of us, so my vote is aye.
Thank you. Mr. Metters?
Yes.
And the chair says aye as well. And I want to thank Lieutenant Goddard and Joni Craig and others that have worked so hard on this issue, and the Waterways Advisory Committee that weighed in as well. Very much appreciated, and we'll continue the hearing. We'll be back in a month, okay? Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr.
Thank you for your
Chair.
input.
Just wanted to ask Shauna, does that vote give you sufficient direction as to when to schedule it?
I'd like to make a motion that we put
Yes.
together a landing parking advisory committee to take a look at a more comprehensive plan.
And I second that.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Nacastro.
Aye.
Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you very much. Good hearing. Thank you. Thanks much. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a drinking water testing and pumping update. Interim DPW Director Bob Rooney. Welcome, Interim Director Rooney. Nice to see you again, I think.
Thank you. Yes, it is. It's been 7 years, I believe. I'm happy to be here tonight to present the update on water testing and pumpage. First of all, the pumpage overall for the month of December is up about 14% compared to December of last year. However, the good news is that our groundwater is recharging about 40% from the height of the drought this summer. So it does tell you we're making progress in our supply. And it's also underscored by the fact that our pumps are running. And I note in the report that I said 12 hours a day. It's actually down to 5 hours a day. So the amount that we're pumping this time of year is allowing for that recharge. On the treatment side, 5 and 8 wells, 5 and 8 remain offline until the treatment is completed. Those plans have been submitted for review and permits being applied for, and that's scheduled to hopefully be constructed by 2025. In the meantime, the decision to go ahead and activate and treat wells 10 and 11 is all on schedule, and there are some pictures that show you the progress being made because the winter is favorable in that regard, and they're able to make great progress, and that should be still projected to be online by the fall of this year. Pending your questions, I have, those are my review.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rooney. I did look pretty closely at the utilization. It seems to me the spikes in utilization in December coincided or correlated with the weekends. Is that a fair statement?
I ask the same questions when I see that spike compared to last year, and you say, well, is it the weather? Is it the weekend? Is it COVID research? I really can't account. We had some freezing temperatures that froze some lines, and there was a lot of water wastage, because of the breaks. But so I think it's a composite. I couldn't pinpoint one specific thing, but it's talking to our contractors, Weston and Sampson, we're not concerned about that level. I think January will be the telltale whether it starts to drop off again.
Yeah, I was just, it's been markedly red, every month, and now it's, we have an increase in utilization.
Mm-hmm.
Just, gives me pause, but it's also great to hear that we rebounded 40%, you said.
In the groundwater, yes.
In groundwater, yeah. And Bob sent around a graph today, Dr. Duncanson sent around a graph today that did show graphically that it bounced up a little bit over the last month or so. Any questions for Mr. Rooney? Any questions? Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for the report.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is public comment on our business agenda this evening. We have a fairly lengthy business agenda and some internal discussion by the board on budget issues. We have a budget and financial policy review, free cash policy. And we'll have our Finance Director, Alex Halila, present that. Budget review, department staffing request by our Town Manager, Jill Goldsmith, and our Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees will also be meeting again this evening. So any comments here in person or online about our business agenda this evening? The budget review preview is meant to be a board discussion this evening, and it's just Jill's opportunity to present rationales for increases in staffing by department. So anyway, That'll be an internal discussion, but certainly there'll be opportunity for the public to weigh in going forward. Okay? Okay, I see no other comments, so take it away, Alex Halila. Budget and Financial Policy Review is a great compendium that you sent along. I appreciate it. We appreciate it. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, in your packet tonight, we have a recommendation to consider updating the town's budget and financial management policies. Specifically, there's one request regarding the percentage of free cash in relation to the operating budget. I'll speak to that after. The housekeeping item is to change the Board of Selectmen to Select Board, so that has also been noted in your red line version. But however, the free cash, if you notice in the agenda report, has come in over the 5% for the past several years. As a matter of fact, it was last at 5% back in 2017. One of the reasons for that is that we received the Harwich IMA funds, the $2.265 million in 2017, I believe. So it closed to free cash and was certified as part of free cash in 2018. That money has carried forward as part of free cash since we have not used that, and we'll probably be making a recommendation to take to town meeting for those Harwich IMA funds to be put in a separate stabilization fund. We did that several years ago. Unfortunately, it did not pass at town meeting, but I think there's general support for it now, since we will be getting additional payments from Harwich, the milestone payments, in addition to that 2.265, and that can be used for wastewater. That will be the recommendation for the board to consider prior to town meeting. So looking at that, when we first adopted the financial policies, we had free cash certified at a low range of 1.7 up to a high range of about 5%, which is why it was adopted at that. The recommendation to have the language changed to a minimum of 3 to 5% of the operating budget allows us to have additional free cash certified. We never know what free cash is going to be from year to year. Primarily, we use free cash for one-time purchases, such as capital items. We've used it for dredging. We've used it for affordable housing, as well as to fund the majority of the capital budget. Free cash is never used to fund the operating budget. So it's allowed us to use, to get some of these items done as they come up and the board's priorities might change, which is why we like to have the free cash available should the town's direction change. And again, free cash last was a percentage of the operating budget at 20.6 million, or, I'm sorry, 20.6% of the operating budget, and it was 8.6 million was certified last year. That's the highest it's been in a long time, and that again was due to conservative budgeting throughout COVID. We had reduced our local estimated receipts. We are being more aggressive moving forward, and we expect to be even more aggressive for FY 2024 budget. And I think that happy to answer any questions you might have on that. Again, we're still waiting for the certification of free cash for this current year, as the Department of Revenue was busy setting tax rates we submitted back in October.
Okay, Alex, thank you. Other than the cleaning up the select board language, that she mentioned free cash, most notably, Ms. Nicastro, while you were gone, so you're up. Ms. Nicastro, thank you.
Yeah, I just, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, the free cash at 20.6%, how does that compare to other towns?
The bond rating companies like our reserves, which is a stabilization fund, and free cash, the undesignated fund balance, to be in excess of 12%. So both those make up our reserves, what the rating companies look at. I did not look at other towns recently. I don't have that information here with me right now.
The Finance Committee has historically questioned having a lot of free cash.
Yes.
I'm not sure I agreed with that, because I think free cash has been a suitable source of funding for projects that are urgent but not emergent, such as some of the housing projects that we're contemplating, the housing acquisitions for property. But 20% does seem like pretty high to me. Having said that, all of that.
And I agree, it is high, and again, that was due to our very conservative budgeting throughout COVID. As you might recall, we slashed our local estimated receipts, not knowing what was going to happen, particularly with the motor vehicle excise, the meals tax, and the rooms tax. At that time, restaurants were closed. We've slowly built those up, and again, for FY 2024, we're going back to the 85% of the prior year actuals for our local estimated receipts, which will raise that, and that is a direct offset to the amount that's raised through the tax levy.
So have we had a motion? I don't think we have.
Not yet, no.
You're looking for you're looking for a motion to forward this to a vote to forward this to the Finance Committee for their review and recommendation back to us on the changes that you're proposing.
That's correct, and that was the
Which
process.
only one is substantive.
Right, and that was the process that we went through the last time. The financial policies have gone to the Finance Committee for their review and recommendation back to you.
Mr. Chairman, I'll put that motion forward, that we forward the proposed changes to the financial policies to the Finance Committee for their review and recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. DeCastro. And a second.
Second.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Any further comment? Mr. Shell?
I would just, sorry, just a question. I thought I saw, and I'm looking for it, I can't find it quickly, that there was something in the rating agency report that suggested there was a third element of the total reserves in addition to free cash and stabilization fund. That the number I remember was roughly equivalent to the OPEB liability.
OPEB is considered a reserve, but that's a liability that is restricted, whereas the stabilization fund and the unreserved fund balance or free cash can be used for any legal purpose as voted by town meeting.
So the number I remember, I think it was a $3 million number, is included in that, in their notion of total reserves, but not.
Not in my.
Not in yours,
Right.
okay. Well, I'll just echo Dean's comments. It's a big number. I hope we have a plan going forward to make useful application of some of those consistent with your conservative financial management. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Shell. And we've made it, we've attempted in the past. We just didn't get the vote to fund the stabilization fund using free cash. So, I mean, so anyway, hopefully we'll get that, we'll be able to use some free cash against, for the wastewater outstanding debt, if you will. And yes, the finance, as to Mr. Nicastro's point, the Finance Committee is, it repeatedly makes, the comment that free cash is, of course, a misnomer. It's not free. It's been, it's been accrued to this account via either the tax rate and or returns from departments and conservative budgeting and frankly, dealings with other towns where we have IMA funds coming in. So we're in a great position. It would be good to kind of put those funds to useful, to use in some cogent and manner. And I think reducing debt is one of them. Okay. That being said, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Nicastro.
Or give them back to the taxpayer, Mr. Chairman.
There you go. Yep.
Aye.
Yes, Ms. Davis.
Aye.
Mr. Shell.
Aye.
Mr. Metters.
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you very much, Alex. Okay.
Thank you.
And they also, the S&P also mentioned the fact that we have such strong financial budget and financial management policies, and in fact that we adhere to them, which is what our auditors tell us, so which is also good. It's great. Okay, next up we have our 2024 budget review. Hard to believe it's 24 already, Jill, but here we are, and we have a whole litany of department staffing requests. So let's roll up the sleeves and get on it. Get to it. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you know, the Finance Director and I are looking forward to presenting the fiscal year 24 budget, which is July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. And we're looking to make that proposal to the board on January 17th. So as we're looking at our financial picture, our overall financial picture, staffing is always an important component. And each year we review the appropriate members and numbers of staffing needed to carry out continued services, as well as day-to-day ongoing services, and the board's goals and objectives and community value statements. So as we're looking to do that tonight, I wanted just to note that we had brought up workload capacity limitations a few years ago in our budget summit. And at that time, it was about 2020, 2021 that we were also hit with the pandemic. So we had our first growth budget, I think, in 5 or 7 years, and we were hit with the pandemic and did a quick pivot, which was absolutely appropriate. But still, some of those capacity issues remain. And at that time, what we did is we put forward some comments and asked staff and department heads to weigh in on what they thought were the challenges. And it still remains that there's increased demands that are less transactional and more complex day-to-day services. And what that means is it's taking a higher level of service to address broader and intricate requests and inquiries that also require a comprehensive response. You'll see that in a couple of the positions that I'll highlight for you, that is a driving factor. We also look at our greater reliance on technology and skills and our changing regulatory compliance. So there's been some limitation in doing training of the workforce just because of having limited number of some staff to carry that out. Our HR benefits administrator will talk a little bit more about that, but also, again, the compliance with the open meeting law, public records requests. It's not just an easy yes or no when we're working through some of the requests that we get, and then the compliance to make sure that all boards, all committees, the 30 plus, are adhering to the state and federal regulations. So much more for OSHA with our town departments. And then, as I had noted, that we have more than 30 boards and commissions. You know that very well as the liaison to all of them. And there is certainly an increased workload of that staff liaison trying to help those boards and commissions, but also work to carry out the board's goals and objectives that you set forth every year. So regular activities that the committees are doing, and then the priorities that you set. So meeting preparation, information gathering, staff reports, all of that to have a consistent way of presenting information so that decisions can be made. And then we've talked about project management challenges, just the growing number of complex projects. I know there's been some frustration that some of the projects that we've approved at town meeting a couple years ago are still in a feasibility study or waiting for feasibility study results, or the library master plan project is a perfect example for which our interim DPW director is working to get that initiated. So staffing does come into that, even though the intentions are always great. It just seems that everything is pretty complicated, so working to get through those statutory as well as our own town boards of permitting. So, and I just briefly mentioned tonight about training needs, just trying to provide training needs without taking staff away from their day-to-day duties, and making sure that we can retain staff and provide them a healthy work environment to invest in our existing employees. It's really important. So with that, what I put together with the help of Alex, our finance director, and Megan, who is participating remotely, is we reached out to the various departments to ask them what they need to provide the same level of services. And what we got back is in your packet, it's about 12 and a half full-time equivalent employees, and the costs that potentially could be associated with that without any offsets is just north of $660,000. So I know that seems like a big amount. We haven't presented the full budget, but I did want to put a dollar value as we have that in the report. So I was going to do something a little different tonight. I can certainly will go through the department staff requests. I think Alex can share her screen at this time. And I'm going to do a quick pivot to a couple of the departments that are here to make a very brief presentation, as all the departments requesting employees had provided input onto a new position requisition form, and we have that in the packet here as well. So Alex is bringing that up. So the first position, if you don't mind just following along with your, Alex, I was looking for the page 2 from our staff report. Yep.
Got it.
So we'll, just in the interest of time. So the first item was requested from our Human Resources and Benefits Administrator. and that's Megan Downey. I believe she's still on. Megan, if you want to speak to this. And so what we're looking for is one new position in HR. Human Resources is basically a one-person office, and as you briefly saw by Alex's chart, we have, over 145 employees. So her position requisition form addresses the metrics behind it. And we have a share position. It's a department assistant that we had shared with the town manager's office and HR. And we just felt that it never had the time to really assist HR. So that was important for us to try to to centralize some of the HR functions, especially with the seasonal onboarding of employees. And Megan, I'm talking and waiting for you to chime in if you're here.
Good evening.
Thank you, Megan.
Hi, good evening. I do want to echo Jill's sentiment that right now Chatham has a one-person human resources department and over 145 full-time equivalent positions, as well as over 100 seasonal and intermittent employees that are onboarded and recruited every year. So what I was proposing and requesting is a new full-time position in the HR department of a department assistant to help with administrative functions and assist in quicker and more innovative recruitment processes, new ways to retain staff, as well as greater focus and attention on employee benefits and employee wellness. Right now, the Human Resource Department handles both human resources and employee benefits, and we do that for not only the full-time staff, but also the retirees, which are former Town of Chatham employees and former Town of Chatham school employees. And so this would provide us with a way to dedicate more time to benefits. I'm also requesting a seasonal position, as Jill mentioned, which is a seasonal staffing assistant, to centralize a lot of those seasonal recruitment and onboarding functions back into the Human Resources Department, because they have had to be taken on by individual departments in order to accomplish what is a very large feat each year seasonally to bring all of these employees on board.
Thank you, Megan. Any questions for Megan?
Mr. Nicastro.
Yeah, thank you. I guess, Jill, from your memo, you're looking for sort of our initial impressions on these positions?
Yes, I thought that if we can quickly go through all of the positions and then get
Yeah.
your input, and then Alex and I can go back and prioritize
Yeah.
for a recommendation.
Well, I'm happy to provide my input as you go position by position, because I did go through them and I
Great.
identified ones that I thought up front had merit for approval, and others that I didn't reject, but I have questions and would like more information about them. But with respect to the HR positions, I thought the first position of the department assistant full-time, that's something I think probably should be funded. I did have a question about you said that there's a shared position will now go 100% to the town manager's office. What is that position? Is that the position that's still unfilled?
Yeah, so that is the administrative assistant, who is the person who takes the minutes, and which is the substantial amount of time, and also helps with follow-up on citizen inquiries, prepping
That's
staff
the person
reports.
that used to sit at the desk?
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
And
So
you're
it's
still recruiting for that?
Yeah, we had some challenges with that
Okay.
recruitment, but it is ongoing.
Okay. So I think that was the extent of my comments on this particular position.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
No, I guess for the two positions, or two positions that we talked about, the first full-time one, really don't have any major issues at this moment. I understand the reasoning behind it, so I don't really have anything to say pro or con. It's definitely worth the conversation. On the part-time seasonal position, would you find that a difficult position to recruit and fill? I would think that would be my concern. I don't know, I mean, with the housing barriers we have down here and everything else, is this position going to be something that you think that we're going to get a list of viable candidates that would even consider this? I guess that's the question. Megan?
So Megan, do you want to talk about?
I hope so, and I do know that that is more challenging than a full-time position, being that it's seasonal. But I do think it's worth the endeavor because of the fact that there is such a workload that comes seasonally that I wouldn't want to put forward another part-time position year-round at this point, unless we really found that the data showed that with a full-time position and a seasonal position, the workload was still there and there was still an excess capacity. But I would like to attempt to fill this position and get that workload accomplished.
And second question, if the seasonal position was not filled, but the full-time year-round was filled, do you think the doubling of the department could handle the seasonal load that would be that you have to handle on an annual basis? Do you think the two full-time year-round staff members would be potentially viable to do that workload?
I think that the administrative pieces of the seasonal onboarding are still going to pose a challenge because there is so much to do for them, not just in terms of recruitment, but all of the clerical pieces that come with that. So particularly with the payroll onboarding and the paperwork for it, it would be obviously easier with doubling of the department, but I am not sure that it would be accomplished in the way that we are envisioning accomplishing it and centralizing it. I think that there would still be a heavy reliance on individual departments and divisions to provide assistance to human resources for that.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meadows. Just a comment. I'm reminded that we have 100 seasonal employees annually. That's, and then do we do group orientation, group onboarding when we have seasonal employees? You said the department managers have been doing it. That's a heavy pull for the department managers. So to echo Mr. Nicastro's sentiments, I don't have an issue with either of these, and I agree with Mr. Meadows. I think you're going to have more difficulty recruiting to the seasonal job than the other one. You may have difficulty all around, but I don't have. I work for this is a lot of work for 100 and 200 plus employees. It's a lot of work. So there's a lot more work behind the scenes than one can imagine in HR. Believe me. Ms. Davis.
I agree. I think both positions are worth pursuing, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, for the record, I'm fully on board with the proposal.
Okay, thank you, Megan. Thank you, Jill. On to the next one.
All right, the second one on the list is through the town clerk. It's a part-time department assistant, and this position would be working primarily through the extended voting season that we have with early voting and so forth. And this year in particular, the town clerk had used part-time election workers to help with the getting ready for the elections and all the way through, even afterwards, and also with the certifications and so forth. I'm not sure if Julie is on here.
I see a Julie Smith. I don't know what's Stewart or Julie. There she is.
There she
Hi,
is.
Julie.
Great, Julie. Do you want to elaborate, Julie?
Julie, you're frozen, I think. It's hard for me to see.
So Julie had completed a position requisition form. There's more detail in there. We'll see if she gets unfrozen.
So I do have a question, Jill. Is this part-time during voting season or pre-voting or?
So I believe she was looking for a year-round, part-time position to help with voting and various other duties. So she's still frozen.
Part-time, yeah, okay.
She also manages the compliance with the state ethics requirements, acknowledgements. Oop, here she is.
Oh, hi, Julie. Welcome to speak.
Sorry. Hi there. I'm sorry. I lost my connection.
I think we might have.
Oh, she's here.
You still there?
I'm in and out. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right, just keep talking about the justification.
Yeah, we're having trouble here,
Am I
Julie.
there? Do you hear me?
So I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to get, sorry.
I think
All right, so Julie, year-round, part-time position, do you want to confirm that?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, fantastic. Yes, year-round, part-time position to assist with our early voting, in-person voting, all of the extra workload that has come along with the Votes Act that was passed. Also for regular daily work that has increased in volume. We've just had, between elections and our regular workload, a part-time person would be very helpful.
Okay, Julie, thank you. Mr. Nacastro, and then,
I'm okay with this.
okay. All right, Ms. Davis?
Julie, just a quick question. And how many people did you need during this last voting session? I saw extra bodies running around town hall. Excuse me.
There was a lot. Yes, I had, let me see. Well, it depended on what we were working on. I did have quite a few additional people to deal with the mailing portion. Everything has to be hand labeled and hand addressed, hand mailed, hand labeled, hand stuffed. So I had probably 2 people working on that. And then at the same time, we had some early advanced opening of envelopes and processing, and then we had to have 2 people, 1 to 2 additional people for the walkthroughs that we had for the in-person early voting. So it depended on what they were doing or what I needed them for. So it was 1 to 2 plus people every day.
Okay, thank you. I'm fine with this.
Yeah, me too. All right, Mr. Shell?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I am as well. Let's move, okay, move on, please.
Great. Thank you.
Airport.
The next position is a request that I have put forward, and it would be an airport administrator. So this person would report to Terry Whalen, who's the principal projects and operations administrator. It does not report to the airport manager. It's not an airport manager, and it doesn't report to the airport commission. But in working with the airport chair, there's a substantial amount of administrative work that he's having to do. And the staff liaison for the airport commission, it's currently Terry, and having to get the packets ready, but it's almost a department in itself. I mean, it has a revolving fund, so there's certain financial reporting that's needed, and just a heavy administrative load, including a heavy response to public records requests that are somewhat complicated or going back a number of years, and getting those together. So the explanation we had here was that it could serve as an assistant to the Airport Commission liaison. They do meet monthly, but it just seems that grant assurances and contract administration and all of that seems to be done by the commission, and they're doing a great job. I just would like to bring it in-house for continuity measures. So public information requests, and also to provide Terry some relief to his position so that he can focus more on the special projects that we have pending. So I believe there was a form in here, and I do know that the Airport Commission Chair Huntley Harrison is monitoring the meeting if you had any questions directly for him.
Okay, super. Thank you, Jill. Mr. Shell?
Yeah, I have very good visibility on all of the things that Jill just mentioned. I frankly don't understand how Terry gets done what he has to do, and this is obviously not his only responsibility. I see the airport chairman, commission chairman, doing a lot of things that you might think were staff work. Not only the request for information, of which there are what seem to me to be a ton, but just the general organization of all the activities. I think this is absolutely critical.
Mr. Nacastro, and then I have a question.
Yeah, this is a position as to which I placed a question mark. What role would Terry continue to have with respect to the airport if this
So-
position were created?
So that's something we need to discuss further, but definitely Terry's role is in facilities planning and special projects. So we do have some landlord functions that need to be monitored, but I would like to pull Terry away from the Airport Commission. I think that there's some transition that needs to happen, especially with his knowledge. But I was looking for this, I was actually thinking, and Alex may be able to chime in, there is a heavy load on the finance team of having to monitor and manage or help the Airport Commission chair and members manage like the hangar leases and other activities that are going on there that I think is a responsibility of us as the sponsors and the administration.
What, if we didn't have Mr. Howard's organization leasing the airport, or whatever, is it a lease? I can never remember, but.
Management agreement.
Management agreement. We would have a full-time municipal staff running that airport. So I'm trying to understand whether there are functions that the town is carrying out that would be preferably carried out by the airport manager.
Not at this time. I mean, maybe in the next contract, but there's still a town responsibility, an auditing trail, and so forth that I believe we should. Oh, Alex can chime in. I think that's the onus is on us in the administration. I don't know, Alex, if you wanted to chime in.
Please, Alex.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, the finance department gets a lot of inquiries from the public on the finances, as well as inquiries from the Airport Commission. So we run a weekly report, or bi-weekly report, actually, for the Airport Commission. But sometimes they have difficulty understanding municipal finance, so they were asking us to, put it into an Excel spreadsheet and report differently. The accounts payable clerk tracks the hangar leases and make sure that everything's in correctly. We do also have to code some of the expenditures to the proper grants, both the federal and state grants for the projects, and then track those payments. And then we do have a single audit when we accept money of over $750,000 of federal money. We have a single audit, and much of that is for the airport. So there's a lot of financial reporting that comes to the finance department and probably could be handled by this airport administrator, at least the day-to-day things.
Yeah, I guess I'm getting at, I know there are multiple years left on this management agreement, probably as many as 6 years plus. It was a 10-year agreement, the last one that was signed.
Yes.
And maybe this is not something that is done at this time, but I wonder if in the future it's going to make sense, considering how the responsibilities, the administrative responsibilities have mushroomed. And I know how many, we all know how many public records requests you get because you recite them in your monthly town management report. But whether we need to take a closer look at what the responsibilities of the airport manager are, and whether some of these purely administrative responsibilities, allowing for the importance of the municipal checks and balances that are required by statute, whether those should be carried out by the contractual arrangement rather than creating additional positions in-house. I just throw that out. That's what's going through my mind as I try to evaluate this particular position request.
Yeah, we saw this as not someone who is a certified airport manager, but more of carrying out the functions and duties of the commission itself. And just as you might see, the town planner for the planning board, tracking and standardizing reports, helping the commission with policy decisions, helping you as a board with our sponsor activities and monitoring. That's what we saw was important. Terry can dedicate 40 hours a week, 1 week for the Airport Commission, and then other weeks he can. And this is the and Terry is not subsidized by the revolving fund. It's a 100% general fund position. So we thought if we can reallocate his duties and functions and then have a targeted person who is doing that work every single day would benefit both management and the commission.
And we could get some funding from the airport.
And that's what we were looking to. I mean, they have leases that are coming up in the next few years. So it's just about how we vote the revolving fund. So if we voted to cover salaries, it has to cover benefits as well. But that's something that we can discuss.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. DeCastro. Ms. Davis and I have some questions.
Yeah, I'm fine after, with what.
Yeah, the only questions I had, Jill, was what do other towns do with the, and I wouldn't even start to think that we can analogize our situation with our airport to other towns, but just how many, do other towns have a secretary to the airport commission that's part-time? Then I also thought perhaps maybe this should be part-time to start and see how it goes, and then maybe make it full-time downstream. I have no doubt the amount of work that's, and new work, frankly, that's come to the airport commission and come to Terry's shop with the noise around the airport. So, and I say that noise kind of tongue-in-cheek, but I think my bent is I'd start with this part-time rather than full-time and see how it goes. But those are my initial thoughts. Anything else on that one? Okay. On to community service. Community service officers, 4 seasonal positions.
Yeah, so we have Chief Anderson here to make a brief presentation, and he is looking for 4 seasonal positions. So they're civilian positions to engage the public with, provide information and support to the police department. So we have Chief Anderson here.
Thank you, everybody. Just to be real brief, I'm sure you've read the description in the handout. I just think that this is an opportunity to really get a return on our investment with these positions. It's been over 20 years since we've had the summer officer program. That has gone away because strictly of liability. It will never return because of the new police reform programs. Pretty much the position of reserve, a special officer, has now been effectively eliminated by the state. What this program would be very similar to what the program is in Orleans, and a slightly watered down version of the program that's currently in Barnstable. Where we had our aha moment on this was during the depths of the COVID crisis 2 summers ago. The county posted what they called a COVID ambassador, and we actually received that ambassador a couple of days a week. And that was a full-time position in a different type of uniform, which was very approachable. And when we reached out to the COVID compliant officer, the data we get back was less COVID enforcement and more public service, community relations, directions, assistance with parking. Over the past years, we've done presentations for shoplifting, dealing with difficult people on Main Street with the Merchants Association. They miss us. They want us back. We've tried to come back, but we're limited to our full-time staffing. So it's more than often we have a full-time dedicated position that if we can afford to put that person on Main Street as a patrol area. If we can't, we supplement it, and then they get pulled away. It happens a lot. I personally would like to see Main Street be a much more proactive as opposed to reactive, area in our community. And I think that they could assist with parking. They are not armed. They are not sworn. They would fall under the police department. We would train them. Our ideal recruitment pool would be criminal justice students at the community college, similar to a paid internship. I would love to go into much more detail if you have any questions, but it's pretty much explained in the outline. If you have a chance to speak with any official in Orleans, they love their program in Orleans. And we've been working with Orleans for about the past 9 months to really mirror their program here. And I think, again, I don't want to repeat myself, but I think that this is the time for it to return. And I think it's needed, and I think those 4 positions, we would get a tremendous return on our investment.
Thank you, Chief. I'm very familiar with the program in Barnstable. They're very visible
Yeah.
during the summer months down in the downtown area and the side streets, et cetera, and it looks to be a great program, to be honest with you.
They've been very successful.
Very successful, yeah. Mr. Metters, and then
Just one quick question, and I'm not trying to be cute with this, but like, so they're downtown and they're working with public, input and parking and directions and everything. Are they authorized to do parking tickets?
Parking tickets, yes.
Okay, because anyone goes downtown during the summer, a lot of unique ways of people to park,
Yep.
which create hazards.
Yes.
So I think that would be a fair amount of their time some days, so.
Yep, their 3 primary roles would be community engagement, parking enforcement, and then supplementing some of our officers. They could direct traffic, they could fill in on some of our posts for 4th of July, they could work the band concerts, and it's nice that they'd be our own people, not that we, don't want outside officers. In fact, we rely on them, but it would be much better for us to have our own.
Then second question, and this is also a tricky question. So obviously downtown summertime, we got big delivery trucks and everything that kind of park wherever they park. And we make it through the summer, we all get along. Would the expectation be that one of these individuals help with traffic in the circumstances, or would they want to steer away from that from a liability point of view because of their status?
They could direct traffic.
Okay.
And again, if they would be instructed, if they had any questions, to call a full-time officer.
Gotcha. Thank you.
and just quickly, are they on bicycles or on foot?
They could ride bicycles. We just recently purchased an electric e-bike, which has been great. We're trying to purchase another one. They would be on bicycles.
And as far as Lighthouse Beach,
And that would cover Lighthouse Beach, yes.
Cow Yard? Just kidding.
If what Orleans does, they've allowed their community service officers a town vehicle to target lots, like Schoolhouse Pond lot out of the way, which is a high complaint area.
Okay, Chief, thank you. Ms. Davis?
So I really like this because I think the community engagement piece is a nice complement to the chamber, and having that visibility downtown will satisfy a lot of locals who just, get frustrated going downtown and seeing everybody with their line, their wheels over the line or whatever, or the parking can be problematic, and access through town, whatnot. So I'm really in favor of this position. So
Great.
thanks for putting it forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Nicastro?
Hi, Chief. Just 2 questions with respect to, Jeff touched on one of the questions. Are you going to have sworn officers on the bicycle patrol?
Yes.
Downtown? Do you happen to know how many of these community service officers you have, there are in Orleans? How many do they have?
I believe there's 6 in Orleans. We'd be asking for 4.
Okay, all right. I'm very sympathetic to this, so I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. I think
Thank
you
you.
heard loud and clear, Mr. Shell.
Yeah, I'm very strongly in favor of it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Okay, next.
So the next position is in the Community Services Department. We have Leah Lacrosse here, and she and I believe Mike Anderson will make a presentation on a community services clinician who's a licensed clinical social worker. This was the first position that was presented and really set the bar for what I think that would help the select board and the community understand when we do a requisition for a new position, as well as the data behind of what could offset and expand our services. So I'm really excited about this position, and in the way that Leah and Mike had presented it to us, it really set the standard. So if you don't mind, Mr. Chair, if I can turn it over to them.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you, Joe. Good evening and Happy New Year, everybody. Chief Anderson and I are here tonight to respectfully ask for your support for a new FTE, which would be a community services clinician for the Community Services Department. In July, the Town of Chatham's Human Services Committee recommended that the town hire 2 FTE behavioral health clinicians. In their recommendation, they requested 1 FTE to serve youth and families and 1 FTE to serve adults. After much discussion and review of the current needs with our internal team of the COA, Recreation Departments, Police, and Fire, it was decided that we would initially recommend 1 FTE for fiscal year 2024, and that would serve Chatham, and this 1 FTE would serve Chatham residents of all ages to start, and potentially increase to 2 FTEs in the subsequent fiscal year once established, once this person has established that the demand is there.
So thanks again. What this slide indicates is the calls for service that we have. Over the past couple of years, we've coded at the police department a mental health code. Anything behavioral related, we use this code to track it. 2021, we had 123. I was just able to get the data at the end of calendar 22. That 123 has increased to 133 mental health or behavioral health related calls for service. And I will like to add, if this position is approved, other towns are going to watch us and hopefully copy this program, because I also think that the time is right and the community needs a position like this, and I hope this presentation can convince you. So some of the challenges that we face right now, again, I'll be as brief as I can for time, and I'm sure these slides are going to be available after. Perfect. Time. You've all heard how much short each department is. I feel that too. I will emphasize how much time these type of calls take. A typical routine call could be a traffic accident to an arrest. It's a routine call for service. These mental health related calls are wide open. They involve usually somebody in crisis. They usually involve a family member or a family. They could be involved in a school, a home, a workplace. And then when we need assistance from another agency outside of our own or public safety, we are at the mercy of another agency that is probably dealing with the same personnel staffing issues that we have. Right now, if I needed something from Howard PD, I know who to call. If I need something from the Orleans Courthouse, I know who to call. I have peers in other forms of my public safety world that I can call for assistance. Right now, there is no liaison that my department can call. That link in that chain between public safety and mental health, there is no bridge there. So when we make our contact with someone from the mental health community, unfortunately, usually it's a first-time contact. And then they're not working, we're not working, we have to follow up. Number three is very obvious. Usually people in crisis don't want to deal with somebody in a uniform. This position would not be wearing a uniform, they'd be in civilian clothing. And again, when we deal with these mental health type issues, there's tools on my tool belt that deal with the criminal world. The majority of these cases are not criminal. They do not belong in the criminal justice arena. But we're the ones that have to answer the call. And
Thank you, Mike. Also, the Council on Aging outreach staff can only go so far in their assistance, and that also goes for the Recreation Department. While we have excellent staff at the Recreation Department and at the COA, if say we take recreation, for instance, if a child comes and reports to their camp counselor that their family is in crisis, we have staff that are trained to talk to that person, to talk to that child, but they're not necessarily trained in how to get them the help that they need or connect them with the services. This person, this position would be able to refer them to the proper proper resources. Not only that, but also counsel them individually when needed. So that being said, our recommendation is to respond to the increasing demand for mental health services in the town of Chatham, we're recommending this new FTE with the title of Community Services Clinician. And we're hoping that this person would work with the Chatham Police Department, the Chatham Fire Department, the Chatham Recreation Department, and the Council on Aging to help identify those individuals or families suffering with behavioral health disorders and/or substance abuse disorders, and to intervene and assist when necessary. And because this person would assist with all of these departments, it's a true community resource. It's not just somebody who would be working in the community services department. They would really serve the community.
And I'd just like to add to the goal, it is to divert persons away from harmful behavior and the criminal justice system. But I want to add, we would like to do that in the manner that Chatham residents have come to expect and we feel deserve.
That's you.
Oh, real quick. How does a typical call for service be answered by the police department? We can perform a Section 12 on somebody. A Section 12 is gives us the authority for an involuntary committal to a hospital or a facility. We're one of only 5 groups that can do that. Not even the fire department can do that. As a matter of fact, prior to this meeting, before I came over, tonight was our 3rd one of the year, and the call happened just prior to our meeting starting tonight, and they were still tied up on it when I came over. So it takes time. What happens is we have to commit them to a hospital or facility, and it requires a transport by an ambulance, staffing, and a police officer staffing. And what's important is, I'm not going to speak to the fire department, but when the fire department leaves the building, there's a process for them to backfill their station. We don't have that. So if we have 3 police officers that are working tonight, and we have a Section 12, that one officer that accompanies that patient to the hospital leaves the rest of the shift short. So for a great deal of the shift tonight, we were short 1 officer. We only had 2. And this is really our only option to remove somebody from a situation where they're in crisis. And you can see the numbers, they're relatively the same throughout the years. Tonight, in 2023, we're at 3 already.
So creating stability with a full-time mental health clinician will give our residents a strong sense of confidence that the town of Chatham is committed to the well-being of our community. Other towns on the Cape have also taken this crucial step to strengthen their response to the mental health needs of their residents. The towns of Barnstable and Yarmouth have already hired mental health clinicians to support their residents who are experiencing mental health crises and need to be directed to critical resources to ensure their well-being. Right now, the only option for a person experiencing a mental health crisis is to go to Cape Cod Hospital in Hyannis, where they can experience long waits to be seen and also long waits for a bed to open up for the necessary mental health treatment that they need. With this new position, we could provide that help right in our own community. Thank you for your consideration.
Well, thank you, Leah, and thank you, Chief Anderson. Very much appreciate the initiative here. I have a lot to say, to be honest with you, and so I'm going to take some time and get to it. This is a lot of what I do. Even though I'm in the finance side, I'm very familiar with this landscape, and I'm a little bit concerned that we're having this combining what the recommendation was from the Human Services Committee into one position. I believe the Human Services Committee last year recommended this youth counselor that I believe strongly in, and I think it would really help with. I also was struck that you touch base with the COA, the police, the fire, the recreation department, but there's no mention of the schools. So I really think we got to plug the schools into this paradigm. I am totally supportive. In fact, I would support an additional youth counselor for the youth. But I think we have the right idea and the wrong model if we're truly going to treat youths and adults. The young folks are a real different animal, and it takes a real different touch. Town of Harwich has Sheila House that works in the Monomoy schools. She doesn't work with Chatham kids. So I think we're really missing the boat by not addressing the need in the schools and the need for a youth counselor as well. Now, you mentioned that perhaps next year you'd add the youth counselor. My personal opinion, we don't wait. It's my personal opinion. And I feel extremely strongly about that position. I would have supported the youth counselor last year, and did, I think, and I will support it again this year. So, wonderful, I get it, you're spot on, but I just believe the model's incomplete. So thank you very much, and I'm gonna go to Ms. Davis, and then I'm gonna go to.
That was my gut reaction too, was the same thing when you said that you were gonna combine the two for the year. I just, knowing people that are in that sort of profession, they usually specialize in one or the other, or, it's usually, youth services, or it's elder services, or I was a little confused that they would be like a specialized community person that could handle it all. That to me doesn't make much sense. That's a spreading a person's resources super, super thin. The resources for children are much different than the resource needs for an elder. Obviously, you both know that. So I'm with Jeff on this. I'd rather see the two positions come straight on to us this year, and and see where we land on it.
We would love that too, but we didn't want to be greedy.
No, I totally.
We thought we would start off slow and then build as the demand increased.
I might add,
The needs are so disparate, they're so different.
See, that's what I agree with Jeff on that. I mean, this is a community need. This is something that is complementary to what both of you do for the community. And I think it bodes well that we want to support our town's people, support, in a way that is not just about the enforcement of the law, or, it's about truly addressing some of the things that are the underlying issues with our community. So thank you.
I think it was Mr. Nicastro and Corey, Mr. Metters.
Make this real simple. You got 3 on this one, because when we look at all these positions, in my mind, I'm thinking, where's the best benefit to put the funds? And, we would love to support everything. Some we will, some we won't. We know there's a need. We know there's a need in both demographics. Mm-hmm. If you're going to do the program right, you do the program right. You know you know that the need is, so let's get it started the way it should be done, and not fall behind it from the beginning. So, while I very much appreciate you guys coming in with a one-time position to verify there's a need down the road, there's a need. So I would be very open to having a conversation with 2, 1.5, whatever, to make this done the way it should be done.
We appreciate the board's support.
Yes, thank you.
And commitment.
Mr. Nicastro.
Yeah, you can make it 4, Corey. I suspect it's going to be 5 when it's Mike's turn, knowing Mike. I just wanted to say, your predecessor, Chief Polino, whenever he came in and talked with us about the budget, he repeatedly talked about how your officers are dealing with mental health issues in almost every incident.
Almost every incident.
Yeah. So this was the easiest of the recommendations for me to say yes to, and I agree that there should be 2, because as Shireen and Jeff were saying, they're very specialized areas. And I was really compelled in the direction of the schools, which Jeff highlighted, when I saw in the report of the Human Services Committee that there are 23 students on the wait list for mental health assistance. And
I'm not surprised.
We owe that. We owe those kids better. So I'm supportive of that. One administrative detail, and I know you talked with town council about whether, on the issue of liability to the town with these professionals, they're licensed social workers who are going to take these positions, and town council advised that they would be subject to the same liability protections under Chapter 258. But 258 has potential liability to the town of $100,000. I would encourage you to at least talk with town council again as to the advisability of the town purchasing a professional liability insurance policy with these positions. I don't think it will cost more than a few $1,000s, but I really don't know that for sure. So I think that's
Be
worth
happy
looking into.
to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Shell.
Dean, you didn't give a spoiler alert, my immediate reaction to this was, it should be more, it should include kids. The information is there to support that idea. I frankly am concerned if you get the right people, they will immediately be overwhelmed with, and can be doing a great job, but still the need is more than probably two people are able to handle. But for the moment, I think two is absolutely the irreducible minimum. And I think part of the argument that I haven't heard here, and I want to say one thing that nobody else has said, this is not going to be an easy hire. And waiting on one or the other until next year is just postponing what is going to be a difficult search anyway. So I would strongly encourage you to increase this to two. Thank you.
Super. Okay, we've got some direction there.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all very
You bet.
much.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, the next two positions are in natural resources. One is a housing and health inspector, and the second one is a boat operator and marine mechanic. I think Dr. Bob is still on. The information in your packet provides an explanation as well as a potential salary expense item. So Bob, are you here? Yep.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, Dr. Bob.
So thank you. So the first position, as the board is aware, you've had a working group now for a couple of months looking at the issue of short-term rentals. That working group was originally working off of a recommendation from the Board of Health to create a town bylaw that would register as well as regulate short-term rentals. And by that, we mean rentals of properties for less than 30 days. Generally whereby people rent their own private residence out through Airbnb or organizations like that. In subsequent discussions within that working group, the recommendation has been made to change it from a general bylaw back to a Board of Health regulation. The thinking being that a Board of Health regulation can be implemented much more quickly, which is right. It only takes a public hearing by the Board of Health and then they can act immediately, where a general bylaw change, as you're well aware, requires a vote of town meeting. And to make any changes to it subsequently would also need to go back to town meeting, as opposed to the Board of Health regulation where it could be updated or changed strictly through the Board of Health holding another public meeting and public hearing. And it's also been recognized over the last couple of weeks or so that the recommendation is taking a more limited turn than originally anticipated. Because originally anticipated it was broader. It dealt with things like parking and noise, some of which are obviously zoning type issues and not necessarily within the Board of Health purview, if you will. So originally we had proposed two positions. We had proposed a full-time administrative person to deal with the registration process and the management of that and reviewing, online advertisements, because one of the things that generated a lot of this discussion was the Board of Health saying, advertisements of houses that could sleep 8, 10, 12, up to 20 people, where we knew they only had 3-4 bedrooms. And so, under the state's septic requirements, a 3-bedroom house really is designed for 6 people. And yet we saw these huge advertisements for significantly more than that. And the Board of Health concerned that was putting undue stress not only on the septic system, but also at the time we were in the midst of the drought. And so there was concern over increased water use. And then the second position would have been a full-time inspector to go out and inspect the various properties, to ensure they were in compliance with not only Board of Health regulations, but also fire safety regulations for things like smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, and fire extinguishers and whatnot. Through the subsequent discussions, it's really been scaled back to more of a registration program with a legal attestation by the applicant or by the property owner that they were in compliance with all the applicable Board of Health regulations, fire regulations, and whatnot. And so we subsequently scaled it back to one full-time position that would serve both as the program administrator as well as conduct inspections on an as-required basis when complaints were received or an advertisement was come across that, was just out of the realm of what we knew to be right for the property. So we scaled it back to one full-time position to both administer a short-term rental program as well as conduct inspections when warranted. This is still under review by the short-term rental working group. They have not yet made a recommendation back to this board in which direction to go or whatnot. That will be coming probably in the next couple of weeks. But obviously, in order to have a program in place by next year, and by that I mean the regulations would likely take effect or are proposed to take effect on July 1st, 2023, recognizing that short-term rentals for next summer, for summer 2023, have already been done for the most part. And so the regulation would take effect July 1st, 2023, requiring registration by next March of 2024. And then the program would really get off the ground for the summer of 2024. But in order to have the staff in place, we had to get this proposal into the queue, if you will, for the FY24 budget. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bob. Any questions for Dr. Bob? We still have the final regulation to come to us, so let's see what that looks like. If in fact it is what Dr. Bob just articulated, then we'll see where we need to head in terms of support. But Corey's I'm on the short-term rental committee as well as Corey. Mr. Metters, any comment or questions or anything?
No, I'm trying to keep my mind open on this one because as we look at all these all these positions, we got to look at it from what is the best return to the community as a whole. And we have to weigh the costs and the benefits and the time and everything associated. So I'm going to keep my mind open on this one. We still have some discussions to kind of flesh out. We haven't made any formal recommendations, official recommendations yet, but this one I'm going to keep open-minded, but I don't have a position at this moment.
I do think the committee's fairly close, I will say that, but I could be.
Yes, but we also got to keep in mind, as Dr. Bob mentioned, like some of the issues that we've brought up, the concerns about are like zoning issues. So, whether a property is having activities that should be or should not be allowed as a zoning issue, this really wouldn't apply to it. It would be another area of the town and enforcement. So, but yeah, open mind.
Mr. Castro.
Well, I was going to ask your estimate of when we would be getting a recommendation from the committee.
I think the next meeting is 17th, yeah.
Late January, yeah.
Yes.
Would we have one in time for this board to determine whether this position is appropriate in the budget, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll be voting your recommendations February 28th. You have to do it before March 1st.
I would just point out that we do get a lot more money into the town from short-term rentals now, so there's some justification for supporting this type of position if we're going to register, whatever the recommendation might be.
Yeah, to your point, Dean, I think it could be somewhat cost neutral, if you will, whatever we did.
Okay.
It was part-time or,
So, thank you.
scale back. Okay. Mr. Shell.
Yeah, I just feel rushed about this. I mean, I was not particularly overwhelmed with the need for this, the regulation. What started out as a bylaw, it's now changed into a regulation. Again, largely for considerations that seem to be more about time than need. And I'm also sensitive to the notion of I mean, we're being told here that there are, I think, 1,300 properties registered in Chatham as short-term rental opportunities. We've been told by at least one resident that that's maybe understated by as much as 50%. Let's say it's accurate. This person, in terms of registration and inspection and enforcement of the kind of things that are articulated as the rationale for this, is I think, completely overwhelmed. I mean, the relationship between what this purports, the regulation purports to be regulating, and the problems that it purports to be solving in relation to one person attempting to deal with all of that, to me is completely out of whack. And I just, I would like to know a little bit more in terms of data. What is the real issue that's being addressed, if there is such an issue, before I'm prepared to support a full-time equivalent of this nature?
Okay. All righty. Any other comments? Ms. Davis?
Yeah, just briefly, I don't feel comfortable weighing in on this position until I see what the program's going to look like.
Got
It
it.
just doesn't make any sense to me.
Okay. All right, let's move on.
The second position, Bob, is the full-time boat operator, marine mechanic.
Yep. So thank you. Right now, the harbor master's office basically has 3 full-time operational positions, if you will, and 1 full-time administrative position. What we've learned over the last year and a half or so is that the mooring manager position has really shifted primarily to the administrative side, where in the past that position had a lot of operational capability. Even with the new online renewal system, if you will, it requires a significant amount of time in the office dealing with the program, dealing with members of the public that have issues or concerns or whatnot. And that leaves that person less time available for operational response. And so we basically have the harbor master and the deputy harbor master to deal with the operational response type of things. And then, in the summertime, we obviously have seasonal boat operator positions to supplement that capability. We do have a standing order, if you will, that requires for emergency response. We always have 2 people on the boat, and that is not only for the safety of the public that they're responding to assist, but also simply the safety of the town staff that are underway and, directing the response and participating in the response as well. And so, having lost that basically 3rd operational full-time position, has become obvious that is a real need to reinforce that position. So part of this position would be the boat operator. And then the other thing that we've come to experience over the last year and a half or 2, primarily arising out of COVID, is that the local marina facilities that we had relied on in the past to provide boat maintenance and emergency repairs and whatnot through marine mechanics simply isn't available anymore. Because the marinas are now so busy with the increase in boating by the general public that they can no longer spare the quick response time and all that we used to have available to us. And so when a harbor master boat went down, we used to be able to contact the marinas and they'd be able to have somebody respond in a relatively short time frame to deal with whatever issue it was, to troubleshoot it and then fix it, and get our assets back up and available for response. That simply is no longer the case. In addition to that, when we are able to get them to respond, the costs have gone through the roof. As you know, costs for just about everything recently have increased dramatically. And so that lack of availability, the increased cost, and frankly, the need to have our facilities up and functional on pretty much a 365-day, 24-hour period because of the lack of response capabilities at Coast Guard Station Chatham in the recent years has really brought forth the fact that we need to increase our in-house capabilities. And so we are proposing this position, which would be a boat operator / marine mechanic, something that we haven't had previously in terms of areas of expertise. This position would also be available to the Shellfish Division to help maintain their boats and engines, as well as taking over primary responsibility for the routine maintenance for the Mitchell River Bridge. As you're all aware, that bridge was rebuilt a number of years ago by MassDOT. However, it was turned over to the town, and the town is now responsible for ongoing operation and maintenance. The operational side we can deal with. The maintenance side, however, is something that we've managed to piece together the last couple of years, but it's getting to the point where it's more and more important that the maintenance be done on a routine, regular basis, especially for the mechanical components of it. We've reached out to a number of companies that specialize in maintenance of these types of bridges, and we're talking upwards of $100,000 for a maintenance contract for a year. So we felt that bringing it in-house and having a person in-house with the appropriate capabilities would serve the town well in the long run. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And I believe we also have Stuart Smith, the harbor master, available to provide any additional clarification.
Okay, Dr. Bob, that's quite a potpourri of responsibilities for this position. I'm not making fun. I sort of buy the mechanic, and I sort of buy the fact that the Coast Guard perhaps isn't doing what it needs to be done. So we need, additional personnel to man boats. But I mean, we have an online mooring system now. I'm struck by why would it cost us? Why are we increasingly burdened with administrative tasks when we just went to a fairly good, I think, online mooring management system where you get online, you pay your bill, it's renewed. So I would suspect we get a return on our investment there rather than having to add additional folks. But that's me, and that's just a couple, perhaps moot points that I make. I chuckled about the Mitchell River Bridge because this was predictable when it went to wood. That's all I'm going to say. Anyway, I'll be quiet now. Ms. Davis.
I'm parroting you on the mooring program thing because I was trying to get to where you were getting to, because we have that online system and we pay for that, or the users pay for that, a percentage of that. One thing, again, this is, I can understand the need that there's a big demand for boat mechanics in this town, and you do have to wait a long time to get something done. I get that, I really do. But there's specialties of boat mechanics and hydraulics. Are they the same sort of thing? I mean, an outboard is a little different, obviously, than the hydraulics in a drawbridge. So I was just wondering how that specialized sort of world would come together in a job description.
Stuart, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Stuart.
Good evening. The relationship between outboard engines, to some extent diesel engines, and the bridge, you may look at it as they're very different, and they are. No question about that. This person would need to go to some additional training specific to electric motors and hydraulics, but their background knowledge and experience and training will lend well, I think, to the mechanics of the drawbridge. It's a $13 million investment that was made, and it's vitally important that it be maintained properly. There is a maintenance schedule and a maintenance book that's over a foot thick. And so it requires a lot of attention to make sure that we don't run into more expensive repairs that the town's going to be responsible for. The importance of the keeping those boats running, I don't think I can understate. Those boats are ambulances for this community. When there's a medical emergency, we're contacting our local EMS fire department folks, and we're transporting them to that heart attack or laceration, and quick, prompt, fast response is imperative. And having a reliable vessel to do that in. Mind you, we keep 2 boats on either side of town for for 6 months of the year, and then 1 boat on either side of town for the remainder of the year. And keeping them operational in today's environment is getting more challenging. Our engines are older. Getting them replaced is not easy. Forget about finances. If you order an engine today, we generally run Yamahas, and you're looking at almost a year. That means we're keeping our older motors. We're stripping them for parts because parts are difficult to get. And to do that with the marinas, who are also busy trying to keep their customer base going, is also it's becoming increasingly problematic. So I don't know if that answers your questions.
It does, Stuart. Thanks.
Thank you.
He did last year, yeah.
Mr. Metters.
No, thank you very much. The only comment I want to make is, I can understand, I can respect bringing in some in-house staff like this. It makes sense for the assets that we have and the demand in work, and with the private marinas, situation. I get it. I understand that, and this question is, I don't mean to be cute, I swear to God, but I'm expecting this to be a position that is to work on municipal vessels, our own fleet, not necessarily a resource for the Coast Guard, because we have no idea what the relationship with that's going to be, and some of their vessels in the past have had mechanical problems they've set idle, and whatever. This is an in-house municipal position, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Just to clarify, that the Coast Guard wouldn't allow us to work on their boats even if we volunteered. So that wouldn't be an option. I won't dwell too much on the whole Coast Guard issue. That's an issue that remains unresolved. The capabilities we've talked about, have been downgraded, and as well as their assets. We've tried to stem that tide. We've tried to argue against that. We have argued against it. So far, unsuccessfully. We find ourselves similar to other communities who don't have a Coast Guard presence or have a lessened Coast Guard presence.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Davis and then Mr. DeCastro.
I'm sorry, Stuart, I have one more follow-up question for you.
Sure.
When you talk about the equipment that we have, and you're saying there's some older stuff, but obviously there's some newer equipment. Don't outboard engines, don't they require like diagnostic equipment to be worked on nowadays? Is that?
They do. Yep.
So
Yep.
I noticed that when additional equipment needed, you only checked off the cell phone and computer on here. So I didn't know if that was, would that be an additional cost to this bringing our maintenance program in-house?
Yeah, and the diagnostic and some of the tools we may have to purchase. A lot of these, kind of speaking old school, but not everything is run by a computer, although outboards are. But a lot of the basics dealing with an outboard are, the same thing we've been dealing with since outboards came to be. So yes, we'll need some, but that diagnostic equipment is off the shelf and readily available.
Do you know what they cost, though, Stuart?
I couldn't give you a good quote. I do know that they're not nearly as expensive as they were when you can buy them for your car now. So I know they're much more readily available, and I couldn't give you
The other
I
question.
can get back to you with a good estimate if
So
you
that
like.
requires a level of expertise that would be
Oh, yeah,
conducive.
this marine mechanic would have to be certified
So
too.
do we have just one kind of motor that we always buy, or do you, I mean, you said Yamaha.
So we run Yamahas, we run Hondas, and one Mercury.
So does each one of those?
Well, the shellfish department runs, I think, basically Yamahas, and I think maybe a Mercury, I'm not sure.
So does diagnostic equipment, is it make specific versus?
It's software, it's software specific.
So it's software, so each different kind of company, all right. Because this, I mean, it sounds like, you know, if you're building a program here, a maintenance program for a subdivision of the harbor master would have a maintenance program, so it seems it's just not a salary cost to me. That's what I'm just looking at when I see this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like everyone else that's come before you tonight, we all have a responsibility to bring to you the needs that we see. I'll just say again that there's a number of issues here. One is the ongoing Coast Guard issue, which concerns me. Our increased, our mooring person manager is not only, helping with the administrative tasks during that time period, during the renewal time period, but that person needs to get on the water and start enforcing the regulations that we just painfully went through for 3 years. So that person is going to be busy. And the bridge is not it's not a side issue. It is a major investment. Bob's absolutely correct. The feds and the state paid for it, and then they handed it over to the town. And it's our responsibility to maintain it and do it in a better job than the last bridge was maintained, mainly because there was no dedicated funding or person to address it. And this one is considerably more complex.
I totally understand the safety issues and things. I guess what I'm looking at is what's the bigger cost going to be, and, so that we're
Right.
better informed that it might not just be a salaried position that we're looking at funding here.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know where
I can
that
get back
lands
to
in
you
the
on the
budget.
I can get back to you on the diagnostic. That's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay, thank you for everything.
Thank you, Shereen. Mr. Nacastro, then Mr. Metters, and then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stuart or Bob, with respect to the bridge, is the mooring officer currently able to perform some of those maintenance responsibilities, or are you bringing in outside contractors on an ad hoc basis? What's happening now?
Well, what's happening now is it's kind of a hodgepodge of different, because we don't have a contractor, because it was really just cost prohibitive. We've been doing some of the maintenance, fluid changes and things like that. We have like a traffic gate that's out of order now. It's been out of order for several months, trying to get a contractor. We had another traffic gate out of service. We were able to fix that ourselves. Sometimes we have to call electricians in because it is a very sophisticated electrical components within that bridge. So the mooring officer is pretty much dedicated to moorings. Those instructions have been kind of rung true, in that, we hired a mooring officer, and we want to dedicate it to, addressing those issues that have been raised in the past years. He does help with opening the drawbridge, but everybody does that. We draw on the office administrator, Susan, who comes and helps opens the drawbridge on those occasions. Boat operators in the summer do that. But it takes 2 people to open that drawbridge. And so that's 2 people that you got to dedicate every time the drawbridge opens. And it's you got to juggle people around. So everybody, I guess my point is, everybody in the organization has to contribute to opening the drawbridge because, we just don't have one dedicated person.
Okay, so it sounds like, in addition to the routine administrative responsibilities with respect to the mooring program, that you're looking to get the mooring officer out on the water more.
Oh, yeah,
To
absolutely.
enforce the regulations and do whatever else he needs to do. I think Shireen makes a good point in wanting to know more about sort of the accompanying non-salary related costs that the town might be incurring. And I assume that you and Bob would bring that forward as you present and the town manager with your budgeting. The Coast Guard issue is very significant, and water safety, we're a waterfront community. If we're going to hold ourselves open to this, we need to provide the personnel and the infrastructure to fulfill those responsibilities. So I'm inclined to defer to the judgment of the town, the town staff, those who manage this operation, Bob and Stuart, under Jill's oversight. So I'd be inclined to support the position.
Thank you, Mr. DeCastro. Mr. Meadows is good. I just think it's going to take a unique, if it's one position, it's going to take a very unique person. There's going to be a marine mechanic, that's going to be able to take care of a very high-tech, difficult bridge, and is also going to be able to jump on a boat and do rescues. But what you bring up excellent points in terms of the needs. I'm not so sure one position can possibly do all that stuff and be available, for search and rescue and everything else we got to do. So I'm generally in favor. I think you need, it sounds to me like just off the cuff, shooting from the hip, you're going to need an engine or two in your capital budget if you're searching around for parts, if that statement is accurate. And I would standardize on a particular type outboard over time, and so that when we do hire a mechanic, that mechanic gets very familiar with that standardized engine or that approach on an engine, and we get the right diagnostic stuff too, diagnostics as well. So I was kind of glib when I initially, spoke and said this is a potpourri position, but it kind of is. I just don't know who you're going to find that can wear all these hats, that's all. And operationally, how you're going to pull it off. But you certainly have articulated the need.
The standardization of engines is a good point. We've attempted to do that. However, Yamaha was that outboard, and it's become their supply chain issue has become very cumbersome and difficult, not only for us, but agencies throughout the country. So when we purchase an engine, we go out to bid. We get cost estimates from three people, and you go with a low bid. So recently, we purchased a Suzuki outboard, and we haven't had a Suzuki in 20 years. But they were and it wasn't even close. They were considerably lower than the other folks. And what was good about that was it was available. It was available rather promptly. So I get your comments about the standardization. We try to do it with electronics equipment, and with our radios. So you don't have to learn a new system every time you get into a different piece of equipment. It's challenging under our procurement rules, but we do attempt to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart. That's helpful. I'm very familiar with the procurement rules, and I'm also familiar with Suzuki's. It's a great engine.
Yep, we like it.
Okay, good.
And we do have another engine in this year's capital budget, so you'll be seeing that.
Good. Okay. Any other comments? We'll move on here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next set of town operations is the Department of Public Works. We have our interim DPW director, Bob Rooney, who is working with our HR and benefits administrator, Megan, if you're still on. And so there's positions that are noted in the chart, but we're still working on the position requisition forms. Bob, I'm not sure if you're comfortable with starting it off, but certainly.
Well, I would ask that, I'd like to spend a little more time looking at these positions. I haven't had the benefit of a year-round look at the department and, coming in and just looking at a slice of it. These positions were submitted by Tom before he retired, so I think they carry, credence. I just want to see if we have some other efficiencies to be able to affect, before we make a hard recommendation. But I would concentrate on customer service. I would concentrate on technical skills, specifically procurement and grants, and I would look at the balance of contractor support services, reliability, and as mentioned earlier, the difficulty of part-time hires. We're finding it in plow driving and gate guards. They sound simple enough, but it's at the end of the day, the town needs to provide those services, and if they're that difficult to get, it falls back on us to to serve the community. And then finally, what I notice is there's some succession planning that needs to be taken into consideration, so that, not that you're doubling up the positions, but that there's some handoff before somebody leaves, so that we're not, grappling with a void. And so there's a few positions that I'm looking at that fall into this. There's not any additional that you're going to see, but can we be more efficient in how we're making those hires? So I'd ask for a buy on this week.
Okay, Mr. Rooney, thank you. I think that's a very thoughtful approach to the task at hand, so I think we all truly appreciate that. Okay, thank you. Next up is the cemetery administrator.
Yeah, so the cemetery commission had voted to increase the hours for the cemetery administrator position. That position reports to the DPW director. It is, and it's mentioned in the narrative. So we don't have the position request form. We're working on that. And again, it just came in through the commission last week. However, the chair said that he had intended for the retired DPW director to put it forward. And so we're still working through that. So he has requested to, this is the cemetery chair, or a member has requested to come before the board next week. Jeff, so it's up to you if.
It's not going to be next week, to be honest with you. It's going to be hopefully on the 17th. Mr. Wickham is not here on the 10th, but I'm the liaison. I'm very familiar with the need. They've articulated the need ad nauseum with me, and we'll do that when they are present. They have some plans, and they're good plans, and they're solid plans. And the cemeteries have been an issue in the more recent past. And I think with this crew on board, the kind of energy I see, they're going to be less of an issue going forward and be much improved. So Mr. Wickham will be here on the 17th. He wanted to be here on the 10th. He can't be here on the 10th and couldn't. He is online tonight. If he wants to speak tonight, that's okay with me as the Cemetery Commission Chair. That's fine, David, if you want to speak. If you don't, we'll wait till the 17th. If I've represented your interest well enough.
Yeah, it's another example of the legacy with the commission chairs providing a lot of day-to-day duties and oversight, and certainly with George Goodspeed for, 30 years or plus. I mean, he was on site and every single day. So that's the transition from the chair to staff.
And that's a great point, Jill. It's an enormous transition, to be quite frank, because perhaps records weren't as tight as they might have been for the last 30 years. God love George. I mean, so there's work to do, there's administrative work to do, and there's catch-up to do, and there's a lot of work to do. So I'm fully in favor of going to a full-time position there, totally in favor.
Great, and then the last item is not being requested is the assistant town manager. We've talked about it this past year, and I still rely a lot on our director of community development to take on some of the special projects that don't really fit in one department, working groups, serving as the acting town manager in my absence. So at this time, we wanted to focus on the various operational needs of the departments, while the assistant town manager would provide more management, administrative relief to me and to help carry out the board's directives. So at this time, I'm going to hold on that, so it's not being presented.
Okay, that was somewhat arduous, but I think it's an important discussion to have, and I think it's an important discussion for the board, select board to have without a lot of input. I mean, just so we can get our ideas out there, and I think it was good.
Great, thank
All right,
you.
thank you. And I also thank the staff that persevered, and those attendees are those folks from the Affordable Housing Trust that have sat here very patiently, and Gloria as well, and Katie Donovan, and Stuart and Bob, and everybody else that weighed in tonight, including Alex. So thank you very much. Okay. Our next item on our agenda is to convene the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees meeting. I typically look towards Mr. Nacastro for a motion here.
You're going to convene the board first, take the
No, I need to
roll.
convene the board with a roll call vote. So if Mr. Bean and Megan could come forward here, we'll convene the Housing Trust Fund trustees.
He's bringing a chair.
Okay, I'd like to call the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees meeting to order, and we'll take a roll call. Ms. Story?
Present.
Mr. Nacastro? Present. Ms. Davis?
Present.
Mr. Shell?
Present.
Mr. Metters?
Present.
Mr. Bean?
Present.
And the chair, Mr. Dykens, is present as well. Thank you. And a motion to go to executive session, I'll turn to Mr. Nacastro, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is going to be a motion. I move that we go into executive session as the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Board of Trustees under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, taking, lease, or value of real property, parenthesis, private property acquisition for affordable/attainable housing, hyphen, request for proposals, submission, close parenthesis, if such discussion may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the governmental body with no return to open session.
Thank you, Mr. Nacastro.
Second.
Second. Thank you very much. Ms. Story?
Aye.
Mr. Nacastro?
Aye.
Ms. Davis?
Aye.
Mr. Shell?
Aye.
Mr. Metters?
Aye.
Mr. Bean?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Thank you, folks, and good night, Chatham. Happy New Year.